Good evening again, everyone, and welcome. I'm Steve Donovan, the Director of Alumni Relations at Trinity. I hope you are all safe and well and enjoying the same signs of spring that we are experiencing in Hartford. The warmer temperatures and longer days are certainly good for the soul. Thank you for joining us for another presentation of the virtual long walk. It's hard to believe that we've been at this for almost a year now. I know we've been in the pandemic for a little over a year, but we started our virtual programming at the end of April. We realize it's not the same as being able to connect in person with fellow Bantams on campus or off, but it has its advantages as well. Over 5,000 of you have joined us for at least one of our almost 60 virtual events featuring the accomplishments of fellow alumni, parents, faculty, staff, and students. And over 40% of those 5,000 had not attended an in-person Trinity event in the last 5 years. So thank you very much for your interest and support. We really look forward to the in-person events again soon, but have no intentions of discontinuing these virtual opportunities either. I'm especially proud tonight as we celebrate Women's History Month, highlighting the contributions of women to events in history and contemporary society, to be able to bring you not one, but two remarkably accomplished Trinity women. I have the pleasure of introducing Trinity's 22nd president, Joanne Berger-Sweeney, who in turn will introduce you to tonight's special guest. We're especially grateful to President Berger-Sweeney for taking time from the rigors of nimbly leading Trinity through the pandemic, but she made it clear to us that she very much would enjoy the honor of facilitating tonight's discussion. So it's now my pleasure to turn it over to you, Joanne.
Oh, thank you very much. And the first thing that I want to say is welcome to Chief Justice McCormack. It is such an honor to both meet you and have the opportunity to interview you today. The first thing, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say same for me. It's really wonderful to finally meet you. I've admired you from afar and it's wonderful to be here.
Oh, that is so nice. Thank you. The first thing I want to do is to say hello to all of you who are out there in the webinar, to hope and wish you the best. I hope that you're well. I think all of us are finally seeing a little bit of light at in the end of the tunnel related to the pandemic. And so as spring comes, I hope so does our joy return. And what I can't wait is to see so many of you come back to our campus. But in the interim, it's really nice to have you join us here for this virtual long walk event. So we have about an hour together and we're going to try and cover a lot of ground. First, I'm going to share a little bit about the Chief Justice's background. I'm going to let her tell us a bit what brought her to Trinity, and also about her various career successes as an attorney, a judge, and a professor of law. Finally, we're going to talk a bit about the role that Trinity may have played in her life and her adventure thus far. But first, I want to start with a little bit of background about Chief Justice McCormack, and I am sure that you will be as impressed as I am when you hear her background. Chief Justice Bridget Mary McCormack joined the Michigan Supreme Court in January 2013 and became Chief Justice in January 2019. And just a few minutes ago, she said to me that the Chief Justice is elected amongst the other justices, which means that she is chosen to lead by her peers. And I don't think there's any greater honor than that. She is a graduate of the New York University Law School, where she was the Ruth Tilden Scholar and won the Ann Petluck Posis Prize in Clinical Advocacy. She spent the first 5 years of her legal career in New York, first with the Legal Aid Society and then at the Office of the Appellate Defender. In 1996, she became a faculty fellow at Yale Law School. In 1998, she joined the University of Michigan Law School faculty. In 2002, she was named Associate Dean for Clinical Affairs. Chief Justice McCormack is responsible for expanding the clinical offerings at Michigan Law School, whose clinical programs are now recognized nationally as one of the best places to be trained as a lawyer. In 2008, then Associate Dean McCormack co-founded the Michigan Innocence Clinic, in which students represent wrongfully convicted individuals. The clinic has exonerated over 15 people so far and has shined a light on the important justice issues underlying wrongful conviction. Chief Justice McCormack has won numerous awards for her work. In 2019, Governor Whitmer appointed her as co-chair of the Michigan Joint Task Force on Jail and Pretrial Incarceration. She has published on a broad range of topics in professional journals. As the Chief Justice, she has promoted statewide initiatives devoted to improving the court's service to the public, and in particular, delivering on a promise that courts are independent, accessible, engaged with their communities, and efficient. For example, together with the Attorney General, she launched an elder abuse task force, which is actively working on improvements to the service to seniors in courts. So without further ado, welcome Chief Justice McCormack, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to getting to talk with you tonight, and I appreciate the time.
Oh, so do we. So I just want to start by telling us a little bit about, where you come from originally and how did you end up here at Trinity College?
I grew up in New Jersey. That's where, I was born in Washington, D.C., but my folks moved to New Jersey when I was 2 years old. So my siblings and I grew up in New Jersey, and I was the oldest. And I applied to a number of small liberal arts college, Trinity, and some of its the schools that it plays sports against, all the others. And I visited a number of the schools that I got into. I remember, it was just such a different time. I now have 2 kids in college and 2 who just got out of it. And when I was admitted to college, I drove to each college by myself and checked it out. And that's just the way, my parents asked me when I got back what I thought. And, at Trinity had admitted me into a small guided studies group and that was exciting to me. And to be perfectly frank, Trinity gave me a wonderful financial aid package, and that was also important to me. Frankly, the visit there sold me. I drove home and said, that's where I'm going to go. And it was whatever happened while I was on campus happened well, because it felt right. It felt like the right place for me. Right. I liked that it was a small liberal arts school, but it was also in a city. It felt like there was going to be a lot of opportunity. So.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely wonderful. And I find a lot of people, talk about the fact that it's both small, but obviously the fact that it's in a city means that you're going to get a much broader experience than at some other perhaps small liberal arts colleges. So it seems that you liked Trinity enough that you encouraged other members of your family to come here. So tell everybody a little bit about that and about your siblings.
Yeah, so I said I was the oldest. I have 2 siblings. I have a sister and a brother, and when I was a senior, or I was a junior, my sister was applying to college, and she decided, because she had come to visit me at Trinity, that Trinity was where she wanted to go, and she got in and she did go. And we have a younger brother, and she didn't even overlap with him. He's 5 years younger than she is, but he decided that he too wanted to go and was admitted and went to Trinity. They're both actors, and my brother is primarily a writer and producer and was nominated for an Academy Award last week.
Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Did you know that?
I
You have an alum who was nominated for an
Yes.
Academy Award last year.
Yes, that is fabulous.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
For a beautiful
yes.
animated short film called If Anything Happens, I Love You. And it's on Netflix, and it's only 12 minutes, but it will produce big, ugly cries. I'm telling you right now.
Oh,
But
that's wonderful. And I thank you for reminding me, because we did actually put it on Twitter. And
good.
so we did acknowledge it, and we were pretty proud that we had someone nominated. But to be honest, I had not made the connection between that being your brother and that being the tweet that we sent out, I think, a week and a half ago.
That's my little brother. Yeah.
So interestingly, okay, so you have two siblings who are clearly on the artistic side.
Yep.
And I think that most people would not say law is exactly the same kind of creative art. So tell me a little bit, kind of what led you into the legal profession, and when did you think maybe that was the route for you?
So I hope you don't regret asking me this question, but I'm going to be, I'm just going to be completely straight. Part of it was pretty well thought through, and part of it less well thought through. I want to say, I'm very glad I made the right call, but I'm not sure at 21 you know every single thing that you want to do with your life. But I had a godmother when I was growing up, who didn't have any kids of her own. So she was the best godmother in the world. She would have me come. She lived in Manhattan, first of all. I grew up in New Jersey. And so she would have me come visit her. And she was a legal aid lawyer, and she would take me to work. And so I had this role model of a lawyer who was somebody who helped people who didn't otherwise have access to help. And it left a big impression on me as a kid. I spent a lot of time at Trinity doing different community service projects, including one project where we worked with kids in a juvenile detention facility, and it made a tremendous impact on me. And there were a number of experiences like that. But here's what really happened. I was a sophomore, and I had a boyfriend who was a junior, and he was taking the LSAT on a Saturday morning. And I figured, well, that's what he's doing. I guess I may as well take it too. And so I signed up and took the test cold and did extremely well.
No.
And so I was like, well, I guess I'm going to go to law school, because that's going to work out. So.
Oh my goodness, that is a terrific story. I'm just going to share with you my story, because it's almost the opposite of yours. My father was a lawyer. My two brothers, who are, 7 and 8 years older, had made it very clear that they were going to become lawyers. And so when I went to college and people said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to be anything but a lawyer. And I love them all. Yeah. And it worked out, so sometimes it just works out for everybody. You get to do where your passion is. So, clearly you took an LSAT, you were very successful at it, and you thought, should I do this? But was there something else in your Trinity training that you think kind of prepared you to want to do law? I mean, you clearly have spoken about your godmother. You talked about some of your community service, but tell me a bit more.
Yeah, I did a lot of, I would say, law adjacent work while at Trinity. I did the internship at the State House, and I interned for at that Tom Ritter, the Speaker of the House at that time. I think his son Matt
Matt Ritter is now oh my goodness, the Speaker. Absolutely.
And I became very close to the Ritter family, and indeed, during one summer, I don't remember if it was junior year or after senior year, maybe after junior year, I actually lived with them and would babysit for the kids while I worked. I had a job that summer working for the administrative office of the Supreme Court there in Hartford, which is now, you know, and the office that that I oversee at the Michigan Supreme Court. But I was an intern doing a project, and Tom's wife, who I believe now is on the Supreme Court in Connecticut. I think she's a justice on the Supreme Court in Connecticut. She was on the Court of Appeals, but I believe she might now be on the Supreme Court. But she was a pretty good influence, and these were all, you know, experiences I had because of Trinity, because of where it was and the opportunities that you just wouldn't have at most of its peer schools, because Hartford offers a lot. And it exposed me to ideas and you know, things that I could see myself doing in the future that I don't think I would have had in any other place.
Right. I'm glad we've captured this on film. So don't be surprised if we want to use that again, because I think you are spot on. I mean, you both have the opportunity to have pretty much a classic liberal arts training where you can dabble and do interesting things and learn a major in depth and do something that may not end up being your profession. But at the same time, it is in a city and you can't get away from the fact that you step off campus and you are in a city, and a city that has challenges. It's not that it's all perfect. There are incredible opportunities, but the challenges. And do you think some of the challenges also, you know, kind of intrigued you and pushed you to want to do some of the things that I shared in your background?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the early exposure to kids in particular who were you know, working their way through the criminal justice process or the juvenile justice process, as it probably was, could have been both. I'm not sure I understood at that point, was incredibly impactful. And understanding that a little bit more about the legislative process than I showed up understanding. I didn't have any lawyers in my family, I should say. I didn't have any background in law or courts or what courts do or legislatures or legislation, and understanding how impactful all those decisions were, and especially on people who can't afford lawyers. And Hartford is a city that's full of people who can't afford lawyers. It was it made a tremendous impact on me, and I then spent a career representing people who couldn't afford lawyers.
And you started at Legal Aid, which is exactly, you know, what Legal Aid does. Very interesting. So to pivot just a little bit, I thought it would be interesting to talk about versatility. And can you share with us a little bit about the Michigan court system and how it has pivoted to the virtual format? I mean, you know, clearly it was something we had to do here also at Trinity College, but I'm trying to imagine what it's like, you know, trying to be a judge in a virtual format. So can you share a little bit?
It's a really interesting time to be working in law, and especially in court administration. You know, lawyers and judges have avoided most innovation successfully for a very long time. I mean, maybe you know, education is close to us, but I think we, like, unlike any other industry, we have been able to avoid technological innovation and process innovation in incredible ways. It's almost, I mean, I think there are really, this could be a whole other discussion. There are cultural reasons for that. There are normative reasons for that. There are legal reasons for it. We're a profession that looks at decisions that were made in the past to guide us, right? So it's sort of, it's what we're trained to do, not change. And then all of a sudden, in, you know, overnight, we had no choice but to figure out how to change, and change quickly if we were going to keep people safe. As you might remember, Michigan, and Detroit in particular, Southeast Michigan, was hit extremely hard last March. I mean, we've been hit hard all year, but certainly in the beginning, it was a devastating. We had a devastating experience with early COVID cases, and honestly, it's been the disruption that we needed. Because we were able to quickly transition all of the courts of the state. Let me just give you the scope for a minute. So Michigan has 242 different trial courts, about 550 trial judges, another 500 referees and magistrates, people who hear cases. They adjudicate between 3 and 4 million cases a year. And think each one of those cases has somebody on each side of it. They are courtrooms and courthouses are cruise ships without the fun and without the food. You know, they're just like petri dishes for disease. I mean, we had to literally change everything overnight. We had a bit of a big head start in Michigan because the administrative office of the courts, that is what part of the Supreme Court. We have a talented staff of administrators, 250 people working to support the trial courts throughout the state. We had already gotten Zoom licenses for all the judges in the state, not because we saw a pandemic coming. I wish I could take credit for that. I can't. It's Michigan is just geographically a big place, and it sort of made sense to us to start, trying to think about what we could do remotely, what parts of what we do in courts could be done remotely to save time and make it accessible for people. So they already had the Zoom licenses. That doesn't mean anybody was using them or knew how to use them. They weren't, they didn't. So we had to quickly stand up a bunch of trainings and figure out how to make sure the public still had access. We chose the YouTube platform and then figure out how to make sure the public understood that was where they could watch what was happening in their courts. We quickly stood up a great tool that's a map of the state of Michigan, and you can click on a county and see which judges in that county are operating in their Zoom courtroom and click directly on the link and be brought to those Zoom courtrooms and watch what's happening.
Wow.
We quickly stood up statewide online dispute resolution that's asynchronous and free for anybody who wants to use it, to give people an opportunity to avoid court altogether and resolve their disputes. We literally have had our foot on the gas and accomplished more change in the last 12 months than we have in 12 decades.
Wow.
It's both been exhilarating and exhausting. But we'll never go back. And we're seeing benefits for access to justice that I thought I might never see in my career. And now I see, a big, bright light in front of me.
So tell me a little bit more about that. And it sounds obvious from what you're saying that people actually show up, right? It's not, because I can imagine that, I don't know, you forget court dates and when it's so accessible and on Zoom, do more people show up?
Your instinct is exactly right. So I mean, we're actually trying desperately to collect as much data as we can about this right now, because I'm really terrified of people wanting to, quote, go back to normal. And I want to do everything I can to make sure we don't go back to where we were, because we can do so much better. We now know we can do better. But just to again, for context, if you are accused of a crime and you can't afford a lawyer, the state has to provide one for you.
Right.
That doesn't mean there aren't all sorts of problems with the criminal justice system. There are, and I've spent a lot of time on that in the last couple of years as well. But in the civil justice system, if you're facing an eviction, you have a family law matter, you need a personal protection order, you have a consumer debt issue, serious issues that can change your life, the trajectory of your family, and you can't afford a lawyer, you might be able to find a civil legal aid office, but 8 out of 10 people with civil legal needs have to manage court on their own, or they give up. So just for one example, in eviction cases, 8 out of 10 people in some cities get an eviction notice and just don't even show up. They move, they just vacate and go somewhere else, and they don't even try to figure out whether there's something they could do about this legal problem. In our Zoom courtrooms, it's flipped. 8 out of 10 people show up.
They show up.
And you know what? Sometimes they learn that they have legal rights or legal remedies, or
Right.
even better, right now we have funding. You know, the federal government has provided funding for eviction diversion. So
Right.
just by showing up, they can solve the problem. So it's a
Exactly.
game changer in terms of access to justice, which
Right.
is
And I can imagine for some people, actually getting to court could be a barrier. If you have to take 3 or
absolutely
4 buses or, you
find
know,
parking,
park.
or you have
Yeah.
or you
Right.
have childcare issues, or
Mm.
you have an elderly
Right.
parent you're taking care of, or
Right.
you're disabled. I mean, there are so many barriers.
Mhm.
Everyone worries about the tech barriers for people who don't have broadband, and I don't mean to say we don't have to fix those problems. We do, of course.
Mhm.
But I will tell you, we're seeing more people show up for jury duty when they're
Oh,
taking it on Zoom for
yeah.
their court appearances,
Yeah.
because they can do it from their break room. They don't have to get a day off from work. Somebody who can't get a day off from work, they can't afford to lose their job. So
Right.
they will, default on that case,
Mhm.
because they can't
Mhm.
afford to lose that job. But they can go into their break room, pull up their Zoom link on their phone, and appear in
And
the case and
right.
hopefully resolve the problem. With,
Oh,
it's
that
amazing.
is
It's
great.
exciting.
So I'm gonna ask if you would share with us some past cases that you have, sat in judgment over, of which you are particularly proud, things that you think really are going to make a difference for the people of Michigan.
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, I hope I'm not being too talking too much, but I guess.
Absolutely not. I
Um,
think people want to hear what you have to say,
okay,
truly.
so
So,
because I want to contextualize what the decision-making function is, because I've been talking a lot about the trial courts, and that's because that's an important function for the justices on the Supreme Court and the Chief Justice in particular, because we have constitutional administrative oversight of all the courts of the state. And as you've heard me now speaking somewhat
mhm,
excitedly about, I believe, given all of the people that are impacted by what happens in the trial courts, that administrative oversight role really gives us an opportunity to change lives. It really gives us an opportunity to do a lot of good for a lot of people. On top of that, we have a decision-making function, and that's the one people are familiar with when they think of a judge or a justice. They think about us deciding cases, and we do that. I know I haven't talked about that yet, but we do that, and we do it all the time. In fact, the Michigan Supreme Court gets about 2,000 requests a year for cases for us to hear.
mhm,
We are a court like the U.S. Supreme Court that decides which cases we hear. So
right.
you have a right to appeal to an intermediate appellate court, the Court of Appeals, but you don't have a right to appeal to us. You have to ask us for permission to appeal to us, and we review your ask, and we decide to take very few cases. But the process of deciding which cases to take is actually quite time consuming. So every month you might review 180, 200 applications, requests for you to take the case, and you have to then, the 7 of us together, the 7 justices meet around it used to be a table, now it's a Zoom screen,
Mhm.
to discuss which among those we think we should hear.
And
And the
about
ones
how many of the 180 might you, in a typical month,
in a typical
decide
month, it's
here?
funny. I can answer you pretty specifically right now, because I was just going back and forth with my clerk, because the number has been creeping up, and he thinks, my senior clerk, he thinks it's not sustainable. He's like, you're not going to be able to get through this many. You guys are going to have to start like thinking a little harder about which ones you want to take. But because I think we're right now in a month maybe granting anywhere from 9 to 15, and it just adds up after a while.
Right.
And then when we decide to hear them, we have oral arguments, which are, unlike a trial court, we are just, in the Supreme Court, people just come argue questions of law, and we're deciding the legal question in a case. So lawyers show up and make legal arguments. We ask them questions. Then we conference the case, and the 7 of us decide what we think the right answer is. And we don't always all 7 agree. Sometimes it's whoever can find 3 other people who to agree with her is who writes the majority opinion.
Right.
And so over the course of the last 8.5 years, I guess, since I've been serving, not quite a half, but 8 1/4, I've decided lots of important cases that I think have and will make a difference to the people of Michigan. State courts is where most law is decided. 95% of civil cases, 95% of criminal cases are decided in state courts, not federal courts. We always hear about the federal courts, but it's your state courts where decisions are made that affect your family, your community, your neighborhood. And let me give you an example of the kind of case that never goes to a federal court, but is pretty important and pretty impactful. It was, I think, the first or second year on the court. We had an issue in a termination of parental rights cases. In all states, the department, whatever your state calls the Department of Health and Human Services, can bring a petition against a parent for accusing a parent of abuse or neglect, and can seek to terminate a parent's rights to parent their children. Okay. Obviously, this is an important constitutional right, our right to parent our children. And it is no secret that poverty plays a big role in what those dockets end up looking like, as does race. And there was a doctrine in Michigan for 40 or 50 years called the one-parent doctrine, which gave a court the ability to terminate your parental rights if your co-parent was found to have abused or neglected your kids. So no accusation against you whatsoever, only against your co-parent. But under the one-parent doctrine, the court could terminate your parental rights as well. So just saying it out loud smells of constitutional problems, doesn't it? I hope it does. He said it did, and I wrote an opinion in that case saying that violated the parent who had not been accused of anything's constitutional right to a relationship with her children, and since that opinion issued, a lot of parents have not had their rights to their children interfered with by the state.
And was there a dissenting opinion, or was pretty clear? What was an argument that the dissenter made?
The dissenting opinion, I'll send it to you, and you can put it up in the. The opinion will speak for itself, I think, is probably the right answer for me. I can describe the case generally, but it's probably better for me not to try and describe the dissent, because the dissenting justice would probably do a better job with it. So to be respectful, I'll let his opinion speak for itself.
Fair enough. Okay, I will make a little bit of a pivot again. This is Women's History Month. So tell me a little bit about what it feels like to be a woman Chief Justice there in Michigan. I can't remember if we were talking offline about the fact that Michigan actually has a number of very powerful women right now. That might have been actually before we were online, but since it's Women's History Month, why don't you tell us a little bit about what it feels like to be a woman in this position, and some of the other women that you're able to interact with, given the high-powered women there in Michigan right now.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting moment in Michigan right now. We have our governor is a woman, our Secretary of State is a woman, our Attorney General is a woman, and our Chief Justice, me, is a woman. And so, our 4 statewide elected officials are all women. That's
pretty amazing.
It's very cool. We're not aware that can say that, and so it's a cool. I think it's a cool time to be in Michigan. Those other 3 women who serve in the executive branch end up, they run on a partisan ballot. They all were elected in 2018, and they have had a lot of kerfuffles with some other national electeds. And it's been a very interesting time, I think, to serve and to be a woman serving. I mean, the attempt to kidnap and kill the governor had made
Right.
national news.
I was going to ask, what you might be able to say about that. But
yeah, I mean, there are pending cases, so the judicial canons don't allow me to comment on that. But the fact that it happened has made national news, so that it's not a secret that the governor was targeted, or at least there's an allegation that she was targeted to be kidnapped and killed. So it's a pretty interesting time. That the court actually has a majority of women for the first time since I've been on it. In fact, when I was first elected in 2012, there were only 2 women until 2018, when a third woman was elected. And then just this last fall in 2020, a 4th woman was elected. And so now we have a majority women on the Supreme Court as well. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I say that given that there was all this publicity yesterday about, in the city of Boston, the first woman is now being appointed as mayor, because Marty Walsh, is now our Secretary of Labor. So she was the head of city council, and it is the first time in Boston's history that it has not been a white male. And in fact, in the last 91 years, it has been a white male of either Irish or Italian descent.
Wow.
And I mean, I hadn't realized that. I lived in Boston for 25 years, but I wasn't, really conscious of the fact that they had never had, it's a major metropolitan area, major city, never had a woman. So it's not routine what you're saying, having, a majority of women on these, on the court. It is not a given that you would be in a state that ever had a female governor. And then the threats against that governor have just taken it to really quite a completely different level.
Yeah, it's an interesting time. It's an interesting time to be in government, especially in elected government. But in Michigan in particular, it's been a really interesting time.
Well, I have a question here from the chat. Sometimes I have trouble kind of looking at all of this method, but I will ask this one. Can you comment on the decision of the Michigan Supreme Court to not hear the election fraud case brought by the Trump supporters after the 2020 election? The person asked, will this be a pattern in future elections, do you think?
So it was a very interesting post-election season. Normally leading into an election, the court has a number of election emergencies, which is just, that comes with the territory. There are, both candidates and ballot measures that sometimes there are disputes about, and they end up making their way to the court, and we end up with a lot of emergency decision making in the weeks leading up to the election. This year, we ended up with a lot of emergency decision making after the election. So we did have election litigation, both from supporters of the former president, but also from others, and a number of those cases made their way up the appellate ladder, and the Michigan Supreme Court has a rule and a set of norms for what cases we need to hear ourselves, and what cases we don't. And if the lower court got it right, and there is not a need for us to hear the case, we simply deny leave. As you heard before, we spend a lot of time making a decision about whether to deny leave. So we spend a significant amount of time on the case, even if we don't hear argument and issue an opinion. And there were no election cases, post-election cases, that by the time they made it to the Michigan Supreme Court seemed to a majority of us that we should hear. So like many courts around the country, declined that invitation.
Right. Thank you. I have another question here that I will read to you. In a virtual event in honor of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, hosted by our alumni office earlier this year, one of our fantastic alumna, Yulan Shu, spoke about the importance of principled dissent in a justice's judicial legacy. She put it very well when she said that a dissenting opinion is really written for the future. So I've been thinking about how this, not only in the context of jurisprudence, but also because we're in a time when principled dissent is important in public discourse. So could you speak to this idea of principled dissent and how you go about understanding the other side of an argument in order to make your own?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, serving on a multi-member court is really different from what most judges do. You know, most judges preside in their own courtrooms and they are the boss of everything. They make decisions and they don't have to consult with anybody else. But when you sit on a multi-member court, if you are impatient or not collegial or a bad listener today, tomorrow you're sitting around the same table with those same 6 people and you might want them to listen to you. So the relationships between the majority and dissenting opinions are kind of important. Honestly, a good dissenting opinion, if I'm writing a majority opinion, a good dissenting opinion should make my majority opinion stronger, because it should help me identify weaknesses and places where I can think a little more carefully about what the opinion is doing. And likewise, I agree with Justice Ginsburg. When there are cases where I am not in the majority on a legal question, I think it's very important to write a respectful but clear dissent, not just to the losing litigant, although I do think it's important for the losing litigant to know that somebody heard her side of the story, but for the future, because you know the law is not it's not set in stone. It has changed and will continue to change. And a dissent is in fact written not just for the litigants today, but for tomorrow.
Right. And so how have you learned to navigate the challenges of having productive discourse about polarizing issues? And I say that not simply as a judge, but I feel in higher education, that is part of our mission.
Yeah.
We're bringing together people who are very different.
Yeah.
We're bringing them together. And this may be one of the most eclectic and diverse environments that they will ever live in. And somehow we're trying to help people navigate and have productive discussion and discourse across divides. And I just wonder how you've navigated that, because in many ways that feels like that's a key element of the legal profession.
It is. I mean, you know, sympathetic engagement with counter argument is a skill.
That is a quote.
It's a skill, and
absolutely.
And that's the goal, right? I mean, honestly, if you can sympathetically engage with somebody who fundamentally disagrees with you, and finish that, and start and finish a discussion, and still, you know, have respect for one another, we're all going to be better off. I mean, we're not going to make progress by not engaging with people who disagree with us. We have to figure out how to do it. We have to figure out how to do it respectfully, because we have to leave open the possibility that we can change her. I believe, you know, relationships are kind of everything. And it's important for me to work on my relationships with my colleagues, because I want them to understand me to be an honest broker. And even when I don't agree with them, I want to know that they will hear me out, and that I will hear them out, because sometimes I will convince them, and sometimes they'll convince me,
Right.
and that's the way it should be.
Exactly. And in my mind, that is the true purpose of a Trinity education,
Agreed.
to be able to do that and to engage people who have a different opinion, and to do so, as you said, empathetically, and honestly. And I think we will all be a lot better off, if we can do that. So, as I'm speaking about Trinity a little bit, I have another question here. Maybe you know, and if not, I will share with you that one of the things that we have done recently here at Trinity is to vote to reshape our curriculum to allow greater space for experiential learning. And I know that was something that you promoted quite a bit at the University of Michigan. But, share with me a little bit about how you did it, its appropriate place, and how you think it might be helpful, here at Trinity.
Yeah, this is a great question, and one I care a lot about. I'm a little bit I don't know, ADD. I have a lot of things that I like to think about, work on, and practical legal education, experiential legal education is one of them that I'm quite passionate about, and spent a long time working on. As the Associate Dean for Clinical Affairs at the University of Michigan Law School, I built a lot of new clinical programs and wrote and focused some of my scholarship on the benefits of experiential education. I always say that what students learn in the unclinical classes in law, the rest of the law school faculty likes to call them the traditional classes.
Unclinical class.
Unclinical. It's important too. There's important stuff you learn in those classes, and I think the skills that you get better and better at in those classes are important. But there are simply really fundamental parts of the profession, fundamental values and skills that will make you the kind of lawyer that will make a difference in the world, that you're not going to get in books. You need, law students need to understand, even if they're never going to do anything other than go to a corporate law firm and represent corporate clients for the rest of their career, they need to understand the way the law impacts communities without resources. And in a clinical classroom, where you're representing people who can't afford lawyers, and you have to stand next to them in a courtroom, and you have to understand how this legal problem happened to them, and what the solutions are for them, and what the solutions are not for them, in my view, is critical to being a fully functional lawyer, right? We are, just because we graduated from law school doesn't mean we're not citizens in our communities. In fact, we're citizens in our communities with the ability to make a difference for many people. And I don't think you can learn all of the skills and values that will make you the best lawyer you can be without spending some time in practical legal education. And I mean by that, working on behalf of people who can't afford lawyers.
Right. It's interesting you say that. I remember going to a presentation by Brian Stevenson, and he was reminding everyone with his, of course, he's done really quite amazing work in terms of social and civil justice. But he was saying there's something about not removing yourself, some of the difficulty and pain and humanity, because you can distance yourself and almost forget it. And sometimes, as I mentioned to you before, I think when you're here in Hartford, there are amazing opportunities, but you're also in a city that has challenges.
Yeah,
And you can't forget that there are socioeconomic differentials when you are in Hartford.
that's right.
You can't forget that there are racial and ethnic differentials. And I think that that is, in my mind, one of the most beautiful things about this beautiful little institution in the heart of Hartford. But, you know, I'm
Yeah.
a little biased.
No, I am too, and I agree. And Brian Stevenson obviously says it more eloquently than I ever could, but he always says, you know, it's important to be proximate with the people who are impacted. He means proximate, like physically. You know,
Physically.
it is
Yeah.
important to be physically proximate with the people who are, you know, crushed by our legal system. Our criminal legal system and our civil legal system has inequitable impacts on people.
Right.
We should be able to say that, and we should be able to understand it. And you can't understand it unless you're proximate to it. And I do think that's one of the big advantages of being able to go to a wonderful liberal arts school like Trinity, where you can have the relationships with faculty that are one-on-one, and they know you personally, and they can write wonderful letters about you. And, you know, 3 blocks down the road, remember that the world has our cities have real problems, and they need our talented, energetic Trinity graduates to go focus their attention on those problems, because you guys have more tools and more talents than we did when I graduated a gazillion years ago, and you're going to be able to solve more of these problems. You're going to be able to make the world more equitable because of the education you've received, and because of where you received it. I do think it's a unique place for that reason in particular, and lots of others, but that one especially.
Oh, so true. So I'm going to ask you to give some advice to students or alumni who are interested in a career in law. You know, what would you suggest to them? I've already heard lots of nuggets, but I want to give you another chance to
yeah, no, I think it's a great question, and people ask it a lot. I think especially undergraduate students who already think they might be interested in applying to law school will I feel like I know a lot more of them than I used to, because I have 2 kids in college and 2 who just got out of college, and so many of their friends would say, you know, I think I want to go to law school. What should I study? What should I do? And my advice is always, maybe it's unconventional, but the answer is study anything that interests you and anything you love, and not pre-law. We can teach you law in law school. It's not hard. It's really not hard. If you love statistics, study statistics. If you love chemistry, study chem. If you love oboe, study oboe. You will be a better law student. You'll be a more interesting law school applicant. I'll tell you that right now. You know, we want a diverse class. We want people to show up at law school who've done things that have nothing to do with law, because we're going to teach you law. We got that part. We're good at teaching law. Exactly. We want you to bring other experiences and skills. And so if you study something you love, even if it's a couple of different things, you might love them because there's a fantastic faculty member. I mean, I had, you know, a religion professor at Trinity that I took every one of his classes. I didn't think I was interested in religion, but I was when he taught the class. And when you have a class that you love or a professor that you love, you're going to do well, you know, and you're going to be motivated and curious. And so my advice is really do whatever interests you. Yeah, because that's what you'll do well.
It's so true. I mean, what we love to say is follow your passion.
Yeah.
You know, that is something that we are trying to help our students understand, where they find your passion, because you're going to be good at what you're passionate about.
Exactly.
It's as simple as that. And we hope that we and our professors here can provide that guide. We can be that guide to help uncover a passion that you may not have known that you have. Okay, we only have a couple of minutes left. So my last is, what gives you hope? What gives you hope that there's a path to greater justice in our society?
So much right now. Thank you for that question. But the main answer is the students on your campus. I mean, honestly, young people right now are what are giving me so much hope. I mean,
Yeah.
my own kids and their friends, the commitment they have to racial equity, to a justice system that works for everybody. The national conversation they're making us finally have about issues that have been there for a long, long time gives me all kinds of hope. It's young people, it's the people on your campus and their peers on campuses, in other places that make me really, really hopeful that I am just thrilled that they're going to take over. I still teach one class at the University of Michigan Law School every winter semester, I like to keep my passport. And they have a much better library than we have at the court. So really like the library, better sources. And I teach at night because I have a busy day job, and it's always on Tuesday nights. And I'm always tired by Tuesday at 6 thinking like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I have to teach for 2 hours. And on Zoom, as you know, it's even more tiring, I think. Right. I mean, it's got all these, for them too, don't get me wrong. And I, every single Tuesday night, leave energized and inspired and just so grateful that these guys are taking over. Can't wait for you all to take over.
I know exactly what you mean, because this January, believe it or not, for the first time ever, I taught a course because we had a January term that was online, and I felt as though I could manage that. And it was 5 weeks. And I think I got incredibly sad that I hadn't done it earlier because it was incredibly inspiring. The students are fantastic, and you are so right. They give us all hope. But my very, very last question, is there a professor or two who really influenced you when you were at Trinity?
Well, there were many, but the religion professor that I mentioned, not by name, was Frank Kilpatrick. And I took every class he offered, and so did my siblings. And my philosophy professor was Professor DeLong, and he really spent more time with me one-on-one than I think I was ever entitled to. I don't know why. I think because that's the experience you get at a place like Trinity. But he invested so much in my learning and made me feel like I could do just about anything. And I'm really grateful.
Oh, that's so nice. I just got a note that Frank is on the call today. So you can say thank you to him.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, and I think we will let that be the last word. Bridget, Justice McCormack, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your time with us. I just want to say, I am just so proud. I have met so many fantastic Trinity alums, and you are certainly one of them.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for your leadership and including me in this fun conversation. It was really fun.
Absolutely. And thank you to all of you who joined us tonight. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. I can tell you in the chat function, I'm just getting so many thank you, thank you, thank you. Fantastic. So thanks so much, Bridget. And thank you to everyone. And until next time on the virtual long walk.